8th grade math students, and welcome to virtual math class. Today we're going to be talking about finding the slope from a table. And our objective for today is that students will be able to find the slope of a line based on points from a table. Okay, so first we're asked, what is the slope of the line? So we're going to use a graph and what we know about finding slope from a graph to use that to find the slope of a line from a table. So right now we have a point right here and we have a point right here. So I'm going to use those points. So I do my rise over run. So I rise once and I run twice. So the slope of my line is going to be 1 over 2, right? So how do I find the slope of a line? I do rise over run, which is also my vertical distance over my horizontal distance. But let's look at this in terms of X and Y. Whenever I do my rise or I do my vertical distance, what coordinate am I looking at? I'm looking at my Y coordinate. So I'm looking at the change in my Y coordinate, and then that is divided by, so if change in Y coordinate goes on top, what's going to go on bottom? So my run, or that horizontal distance, that is my X coordinate. I'm looking at the change in my X coordinate. So another way that I could say that I find my slope is by doing the change in my Y coordinate divided by the change in my X coordinate. So I'm going to use that. So the change in Y, we can represent that by a little triangle. So change in Y over my change in X. So I look at the table and I have my X coordinate and my Y coordinate. So I need to look at how it's changing on each side and then put the change in Y divided by my change in X. So how do I get from 3 to 5? That's plus 2. From 5 to 7, that's plus 2. From 7 to 9, plus 2. From 9 to 11, plus 2. So then so my change in my Y is 2 because I'm adding 2 every time. What about my change in X? So how do I get from -2 to -1? From -2 to -1 is plus 1. From -1 to 0, plus 1. 0 to 1, plus 1. 1 to 2 is plus 1. So my change in my X coordinate is 1. So my slope, or M, equals 2 over 1, or I could just say that my slope is 2. In our next example, so we're going to look at our change in Y over our change in X. So my Y coordinate, from 5 to 2, I subtract 3. From 2 to -1, I subtract 3. And from -1 to 4, same thing. And from 4 to -7, I subtract 3 every time. So my change in Y is going to be -3. Now I look at my change in X. So I go from -3 to 2. That's plus 1. -2 to -1 is plus 1. -1 to 0 is plus 1. And 0 to 1 is plus 1. So I have a positive 1. So my slope would be -3 over 1, but -3 divided by 1 is going to just be -3. So the slope of my line is -3. And again, so I do my change in Y over my change in X. What is my Y coordinate changing by each time? So my Y coordinate is adding 4 each time. So -17 to -13 plus 4. -13 to -9, -9 to -5, -5 to -1. I'm adding 4 each time, so the change in my Y coordinate is 4. And what is happening from my X coordinate? What is it going up by each time? So my X coordinate is going up by 1 every time. So the change in my X coordinate is going to be 1. So my slope is 4 over 1, which will just be 4. So the slope of my line on this one is 4. Okay, so on your own, find the slope of the line from the table. So find your change in Y and divide it by your change in X. So I'm subtracting, my change in Y would be -5. My change in X is plus 1. So my slope then would be 5. Good job, guys. So on this one, it's a little bit tricky, but I think you can do it. So your change in y divided by your change in x, what's your slope going to be? So my change in y is 0. My change in x is 2. And what is 0 divided by 2? 0 divided by 2 equals 0. So the slope of my line for this one is 0. So again, find the slope of the line from the table. Again, it might look a little tricky, but I promise you can do this. So on this one, my change in y is 2, and my change in x is 0. And what is 2 divided by 0? It's going to yell at you because you can't divide by 0. So what is the slope of my line going to be? Undefined. Good job. It was a little tricky, but remember, you can't divide by 0. So whenever it yells at you like that or it gives you an error message, that's an undefined line. So if we have the same x coordinate, that means it's going to be a vertical line, which means it's going to be an undefined slope. So fantastic job. Let me know if you have any questions or concerns.